The accidental consort. Let me be very clear about something before this story begins. I did not eat the crimson herb on purpose. I want that on record. I want it carved into the great stone tablets of the serpent heavens, annotated with multiple exclamation points and perhaps a small illustration of a snake looking profoundly sorry. Ziogen, also known as Little Gold, also known as that dumb golden snake who can't read warning signs, did not intentionally consume the bleeding heart crimson herb, which is, as it turns out, a cultivation treasure of the highest possible order and also incredibly spicy. Here's what actually happened. I was hungry. I am almost always hungry. I am a snake, specifically a small golden garter snake of approximately 300 years of cultivation, which sounds impressive until you learn that the average stone boulder in this mountain range has been sitting around for longer and has accumulated more ambient spiritual energy than I have. I am, by all measurable metrics, the least significant creature in the Jade Serpent Mountains. But I am a cheerful least significant creature. I have a lovely den under a warm rock. I have perfected the art of convincing field mice to walk slightly to the left and directly into my coils. I have 300 years of experience napping in sunbeams. Life, while humble, has been good. And then I saw the red herb. It was glowing. Things that glow are usually either very important or very edible. I have lived 300 years on the logic that if it's glowing, it's interesting, and if it's interesting, it might be a snack. This logic has served me adequately until now. One moment I was a small golden snake eyeing a suspiciously luminous plant in a mountain crevice. The next moment I was on fire. The moment after that, I was considerably less small. And thus began the worst and also somehow the best period of my entire 300-year existence, beginning with becoming a person. Chapter 1. When I came back to consciousness, I had legs. I want to emphasize how profoundly upsetting this was. Legs are, and I cannot stress this enough, genuinely unnecessary. I have slid across the earth for 3 centuries without them. I have climbed trees, crossed rivers, navigated boulders, and once escaped a rather persistent hawk, all without a single leg. And now I had 2 of them attached at the hips, which are apparently a thing hips do, and they were bending in ways that did not feel anatomically correct. I flopped onto my stomach, then remembered I had a stomach now, also a back, and arms. What are arms? Why do they have so many joints? NNNGH, I said, which was the first human sound I had ever made, and I felt it was appropriate given the circumstances. I managed to roll over onto my back and stare at the sky. The sky at least was unchanged, blue, clouds, nice. I had always liked the sky. I lay there for a while processing the fact that I now had fingers, which are, it turns out, extremely weird if you have never had them before. I spent approximately 20 minutes just moving them individually. Then I made a fist, then I opened the fist. Incredible, terrible, what is this for? Eventually I attempted to stand up. This did not go well. Here is what no one tells you about legs. They require balance, which is a skill, and skills require practice. And practice requires not immediately falling face first into a bush the moment you attempt to put weight on them. I fell into the bush 3 times. The bush, for its part, seemed resigned to this. After the 4th attempt, I managed to stay upright for a full 4 seconds before toppling sideways into a different bush. Progress. I also discovered during this process that I was apparently now clothed in some fashion. The transformation had provided me with white robes trimmed in gold, which was very thoughtful of the herb and also extremely impractical because white robes showed every bush dive immediately. I looked like I had been in a minor catastrophe involving foliage, which was accurate. By the time the sun had shifted an hour or so, I had figured out the basics of bipedal locomotion. Put weight on foot, shift, put weight on other foot, try not to think too hard about it. The moment I thought too hard about it, I fell over again. It was like swimming, you had to just do it and trust that your body knew something your brain didn't. I shuffled to the edge of the small mountain spring nearby and looked at my reflection. The young man looked back at me. He had very bright golden eyes, and I mean golden, not brown, not amber, actual gold like polished coins, and long pale gold hair that was currently full of leaves from the bush encounters. His features were fine-boned and delicate, with the look of someone who had been made by someone who usually made celestial jade statues but had been asked to make a person this one time instead. He looked slightly startled, which made sense because he was. You, I informed my reflection, are extremely handsome. My reflection looked back at me with those enormous golden eyes and said nothing. Fair enough. Well, I said to the spring, the bush, the mountain in general, this is fine. I will figure out human things. I figured out boulders. I figured out the hawk. I can figure out knees. A distant rumbling rolled through the mountains and the spiritual energy around me, which I could now perceive with alarming clarity, the herb apparently having upgraded my senses considerably, shifted and spiked. Something large and powerful was moving. My new human nose, which was distressingly efficient compared to my old snake senses even while still being much worse than a snake's tongue, caught a scent on the wind. Rain and lightning and deep earth and something else, something vast and old and every single instinct from 300 years of being a snake fired simultaneously in my nervous system. Something very large is nearby, and you should be either very still or very far away. I had legs now, I chose very far away. I ran badly, I fell twice more, but I ran. This, in retrospect, was the exact wrong decision, because I ran directly toward the thing I was running from. When you are a snake and have no legs, your navigation is primarily based on smell and vibration. When you are a new person with legs and the navigation instincts of a snake, your sense of direction is, charitably speaking, absolutely terrible. I crashed through a stand of silver pines, skidded on wet leaves, performed an entirely unintentional somersault that my robes did not appreciate, and landed in a small clearing. In the center of the clearing was a man. He was very tall. He was dressed in robes of deep black and midnight blue, and silver was braided through his long dark hair in patterns that looked like lightning. His eyes were a pale, storm cloud gray, the kind of gray that happened right before the sky cracked open. He was sitting cross-legged on a flat stone, apparently meditating, and he looked like someone had carved him from a mountain and taught him to breathe and told him he was allowed to be the most attractive thing in any given landscape at all times, and he had taken that assignment very seriously. He opened his eyes and looked at me. I looked at him. He had the air of someone who had not been surprised in a very, very long time. I had the air of someone who was currently lying face down on the ground because of my final somersault and had not yet gotten up. "Hello," I said from the ground. His gray eyes tracked over me with the slow, measured assessment of a creature who was used to knowing exactly what everything around him was in terms of power, threat, and relevance. I watched that assessment happen. I watched it reach a conclusion I could not read. I scrambled upright, pulling leaves out of my hair with what dignity I had left, which was not much. "You are not from this mountain," he said. His voice was low and even, the kind of voice that came from someone who had never once had to raise it to be heard. "I live under a rock," I said helpfully, "about half a li south." A very small pause. "You live under a rock." "It's a good rock." I felt this was worth defending. Very flat on top, good sun exposure. He looked at me for a moment that stretched out like taffy, then, unexpectedly, "Are you injured?" "Spiritually," I said, "somewhat. I ate an herb and now I have legs and I am still figuring out the knees." Another pause, this one longer. "Knees," he repeated. "They bend the wrong way," I explained, "or perhaps the right way. I am not certain yet. I only had them for about an hour." Something happened in those storm gray eyes. It was subtle. If I had been anyone other than a snake who had spent 3 centuries reading the minute expressions of larger creatures in order to determine if they were going to eat me, I would have missed it. It was, unless I was very much mistaken, the flicker of someone who was finding this extremely funny and had extensive practice not showing it. "You consumed a spiritual herb and transformed," he said. It was not quite a question. "The bleeding heart crimson herb," I confirmed. It was glowing. Things that glow are usually interesting. "That herb," he said carefully, "takes most serpents 1,000 years to approach without being overwhelmed by its energy." I considered this. I thought it might be a snack, I admitted. And there it was. The corner of his mouth moved, just slightly, just enough. The mountain-carved beautiful man who had clearly never laughed at anything since the formation of the world had a small battle with himself and won mostly, except for that one corner. "I see," he said. "I take it," I said, reading the situation the way only 3 centuries of being the small thing in a world of large things could teach you, that you are someone important. "I am," he said. "And this is your mountain?" "It is." "And I have technically been trespassing under my rock." "You have." I straightened up, picked the last leaf from my hair, and offered him what I hoped was a dignified bow, though bow mechanics were also new to me and it probably looked like a very enthusiastic nod. "Zio Jin," I said, 300 years, golden garter snake, deeply apologetic about the trespassing and also the somersaults. "You are." The pause this time had a different quality. It was the pause of someone who was not often asked to introduce himself because most people already knew and who was now recalibrating. Yi Shenlong, he said, Emperor of the Jade Serpent Mountains. Oh. Oh. The Snake Emperor, the most powerful serpent demon in 100 mountain ranges, currently sitting in a clearing meditating and now watching me with those gray eyes as I absorbed the information that I had been trespassing under a rock on the Emperor's Mountain for 300 years and had never once known. The good rock, I said weakly, is yours. I will absolutely move the rock or vacate the area around it. The rock itself seems fairly fixed. He looked at me for a long moment, then he said with absolute gravity-defying calm, you may keep the rock. And that, as they say, was how it started. Chapter 2. I should have left after the rock conversation. That was clearly the moment to bow again, more carefully this time, and retreat with whatever shreds of dignity remained and go practice walking somewhere private. I did not do that because the Snake Emperor then stood up, which took approximately 2 seconds and produced the same effect as a mountain choosing to rise from the earth, and said, walk with me. When the most powerful entity in 100 mountain ranges says, walk with me, in a voice like thunder wrapped in silk, you walk with him. This is one of those situations where being a small snake for 300 years has given you excellent instincts about when to comply. I walked with him, badly at first because he did not comment on this. He set a pace that somehow accommodated my lurching gait without appearing to slow down at all, which I found either very considerate or very practiced, and I was not sure which possibility was more interesting. You transformed today, he said. We were moving along a ridge path above the tree line. The mountains spread out around us in layers of blue and silver, and I could feel the spiritual energy coiling through them like a living thing. A few hours ago, I confirmed. I am still surprised by this. The bleeding heart crimson herb appears once every 500 years, he said. I had been expecting to find it this cycle. I was going to harvest it for my tribulation preparations. I stopped walking. He stopped 2 steps later and turned to look at me with that calm, patient gray gaze. I ate your tribulation preparation herb, I said carefully. I ate it by accident, thinking it was a snack, and I ate your important tribulation preparation herb. You did. I am incredibly sorry. It is done, he said, with the equanimity of someone who had either truly transcended attachment to outcomes or was saving his feelings about it for later in private. The herb found who it was meant for. This was a very gracious thing to say. It made me feel slightly worse because gracious people who are being gracious about things you ruined are infinitely harder to apologize to than people who are just angry. What is the tribulation? I asked, because filling silence with questions seemed like the right instinct. He was quiet for a moment in a way that suggested the question touched something he was choosing how to answer. I am approaching my final lightning tribulation, he said at last. To ascend beyond the peak of my current cultivation, it will be significant. How significant? The heavens, he said with the dispassion of someone reporting mild weather, will attempt to kill me with everything they have. Oh, I said, that does sound significant. The elders of the clan have been arguing that I should secure a consort before the tribulation, he continued, which seemed like a sharp left turn, to stabilize my bloodline and ensure succession in case the attempt fails. I felt this was a lot of information for a ridge walk with a stranger. And will you secure a consort? I had not planned to, he said, and then he looked at me with those storm-gray eyes, and I felt something that was either spiritual energy resonance or the universe being extremely funny at my expense, and he said, the spiritual energy within you is extraordinary, more than you likely know. I blinked. I ate a powerful herb. It is not only the herb, he said. The herb reacted with something already present. Your bloodline is unusual, rare. I had never once thought about my bloodline. I was a golden garter snake. I had been a golden garter snake for 300 years. I ate field mice and napped in sunbeams. I did not have notable bloodlines. I had a nice rock. I think you may be confusing me with someone, I said slowly, who is important. I am not, he said simply and walked on, and after a moment I scrambled to follow because otherwise I would be alone on a ridge with no sense of direction and probably fall down a mountain. The Snake Clan's main territory was centered around a complex of caves and stone pavilions built into the mountain's heart, and it was here that Yi Shenlong apparently intended to take me. because the path curved inward and down, and then we were walking through an actual gate with actual guards who were actual enormous serpent demons in humanoid form, and they were staring at me. All of them were staring at me. It was the golden eyes and hair, I realized, and the spiritual energy that apparently I was radiating like a very enthusiastic lamp. I could feel it now that I was paying attention, a warm, golden pulse mine around me, odd and unfamiliar and apparently very noticeable. The guards did not challenge us, of course they did not. You do not challenge the Snake Emperor, but their eyes tracked me in a way that felt very much like an assessment, and I did not enjoy it. "They're staring at me," I said quietly. "Yes," said Yi Shenlong. "Why?" "Because," he said with the careful tone of someone choosing words, "a newly transformed serpent of your apparent power and rarity arriving with me will prompt speculation." "What kind of speculation?" He paused at the entrance to what appeared to be a large ceremonial hall. "The elders," he said, "will believe I have already chosen." I parsed this sentence, I parsed it again, I looked at the hall, I looked at him, I looked at the hall again. "Chosen," I repeated, "a consort." "I did not say that," he said, "I said they will believe it." "Is there a difference?" I asked, which felt like a very important question. The corner of his mouth did the thing again, that barely there almost smile. "That," he said, "remains to be seen." He opened the door. Inside, approximately 40 pairs of serpent demon eyes turned to look at me. The wave of spiritual energy that hit me from the room, the assembled power of the Snake Clan's Elder Council, was genuinely dizzying, like standing in a river during a flood. Yi Shenlong stepped in, and every eye immediately shifted to him with the instinctive deference of prey to the apex predator, and then shifted back to me, the extremely confused golden person who had followed him in and was trying very hard not to fall over. An elder near the front, very large, very old, with the look of someone who had been disapproving of things since before I was hatched, said, in a voice of tremendous import, "My lord, you have brought..." "A guest," said Yi Shenlong, with the tone that ended conversations about itself. The elder's eyes flicked between us. His expression went through several stages in about 1 second: surprise, calculation, hope, excitement, and then a terrible, terribly obvious attempt to seem neutral. "Of course," he said, "a guest." Every single person in that room did not believe for one moment that I was just a guest. I could tell. Snake demons are very good at not saying what they think while thinking it very loudly. I had spent 300 years around them. I knew the energy of an entire room deciding something simultaneously and pretending they hadn't. They had decided something about me. I was very much afraid I knew what. Chapter 3. Within 3 days of my arrival, or rather, of my accidental stumbling into the orbit of the Snake Emperor, I had been assigned a room in the stone pavilions, been given 3 meals a day by a very nervous attendant who kept bowing every time I breathed, and achieved a near-perfect understanding of who exactly wanted what from this entire situation. The Elder Council wanted me to be a consort because a consort meant succession was secured, and the Emperor would focus on surviving his tribulation instead of meditating alone on a mountaintop with the serene martyrdom of someone who had decided dying was probably fine. The younger clan members wanted me to be a consort because I was apparently something called a radiant golden bloodline, which I had not known about until Elder Shan told me in an extremely long and complicated speech involving genealogy diagrams that I had not asked for. Golden bloodlines were rare, very rare, power-enhancing partnership rare. There were clan members who looked at me the way I used to look at glowing herbs, i.e., potentially a snack, probably important. And then there was Snake King Haimo. Haimo was not the emperor. He was the king of a neighboring territory, a large black king cobra demon of enormous power and equally enormous self-regard. He arrived on the 4th day with a retinue of 20 attendants and the energy of someone who had been absolutely certain they were about to be emperor one day and had recently learned they were not. He found me in the garden. I had discovered gardens, and gardens were excellent because they had things growing in them that I could identify as interesting, though I was now much more careful about eating anything that glowed, and he looked at me the way the elders had looked at me except without the pretense of neutrality. "You," he said in a voice that was used to being obeyed, "are the creature who has been occupying the emperor's attention." "I am a guest," I said carefully, because Yi Shenlong had established that word and I was going to use it as a shield for as long as it held. You are a distraction, said Haimo, moving closer with the smooth glide of a very large snake wearing a human shape at a critical time. The Emperor's tribulation approaches. He cannot afford attachments. I held very still the way 300 years had taught me to hold still when something bigger was getting very close. I don't see that this concerns you, I said, which was brave or foolish, I was not sure which. Haimo smiled. It was not a pleasant smile. It concerns me, he said, because I have invested considerable interest in who does and does not occupy a position at the Emperor's side, and small golden snakes who stumble in from the hills are not part of that arrangement. Ah, I thought so. That is how it is. He wants the Emperor's ear, the Emperor's succession, the Emperor's power, and I am in the way of that plan. Wonderful. I have been a person for 4 days and I already have an enemy. I am just staying in the guest rooms, I said. I haven't done anything. You exist, said Haimo, in a way that is inconvenient. I find it is often simplest to correct existence problems early. And then Yi Shenlong was there. I had not heard him approach. I suspect no one heard Yi Shenlong approach unless he wanted them to, and right now he manifestly had not wanted Haimo to hear him, because the larger demon went very still in the specific way that very large things go still when they have just become aware of something larger. The Emperor's gray eyes moved between me and Haimo with a calm that was somehow more dangerous than any expression of anger would have been. Haimo, he said, this is the second time you have approached my guest without invitation. We were simply speaking, said Haimo, recovering smoothly. Getting acquainted, the little one is charming. Xiaojin, said Yi Shenlong, come. I went, with profound gratitude and very little dignity I went. We walked back through the stone pavilions in silence for a moment before I said, he wants to hurt me. Yes, said Yi Shenlong. Is that a problem you are going to help with, or one I need to solve myself? He glanced down at me. He was considerably taller than me, which, given that I was now a fairly tall human person, suggested he was an extremely tall human person, with something that might have been either amusement or respect. Can you defend yourself? I could bite him, I offered. Though I understand the herb gave me some cultivation ability, I am still determining its extent. Yesterday I accidentally made a rock float. I'm not sure how I did it. You made a rock float, he repeated. Just a small rock, a very unimpressive rock, nothing like your mountains. He stopped walking and turned to look at me fully, those gray eyes doing the slow, careful thing again where they were reading something I could not see. Show me, he said. The floating, I'm not sure I can do it on pur. Show me. I looked around for a suitably small rock, found one, stared at it with the sort of intensity I had previously reserved for field mice, and thought about it lifting. There was a pull of energy from that warm golden center of me, and the rock rose about 2 feet into the air, rotated once, and then I lost concentration and it dropped. Yi Shenlong looked at the rock, he looked at me, he looked at the rock again. Xiaojin, he said very carefully, how long have you been practicing cultivation? I haven't, I said, I just did that thing with my mind. Is that not how it usually goes? A longer pause than usual. No, he said, it is not usually how it goes. Oh, I consider this, is it bad? It is, he said slowly, the opposite of bad. It is Xiaojin, you lifted that stone with raw intent, no technique, no formation, just will. The rock was not very heavy, I pointed out. That is not the point, he said, and he was doing the thing again where he was not quite smiling at me with those contained gray eyes. The technique should not have worked without cultivation training. You do not have cultivation training. I have 300 years of napping in sunbeams, I offered. That is not, he paused. That is actually not entirely irrelevant, he said, in the tone of someone updating their worldview in real time. Passive absorption, for 3 centuries, while sitting directly above a convergence point in the mountain's spiritual energy lines. He looked at me with an expression I had not seen on him before. It had weight to it, intention, something that sat in the air between us and did not quite leave even when he turned and resumed walking and said lightly, I will teach you. Cultivation, I asked, hurrying after him. To survive, he said, and then cultivation in that order. I thought about Haimo's smile and the elder's eyes and the way the whole clan seemed to be quietly watching to see what I was and what it meant. I thought about Yi Shenlong arriving in the garden at exactly the right moment, which was either coincidence or something he would never admit to. I decided survive was a good starting point. All right, I said, teach me. Chapter 4. Here is what I knew about the Snake Emperor within 2 weeks of arriving in his mountain. He rose before dawn and meditated on the highest peak for 2 hours before anyone else was awake. He ate very little and was disciplined about it in a way that suggested he had long since stopped thinking of eating as enjoyment. He spoke rarely in council meetings, but when he did, every word was a small stone dropped into still water, the ripples spreading and spreading. He was feared and he was respected, but he was not, I thought, much liked, or rather, he was liked in the way one likes a mountain, i.e., from a respectful distance and with the awareness that it could crush you. He was also, when it was just us in the cultivation courtyard with no one watching, quietly funny in a way that required you to be paying very close attention to even notice. "You are doing the thing again," he said once, not looking up from the formation diagram he was drawing in the air with one finger. "What thing?" I asked. "The thing where you stare at the energy lines as if they have personally offended you." "They keep moving," I said. "Every time I think I understand where they are, they shift." "They are responding to you," he said. "Your energy is," he paused, which with him meant something needed to be said carefully, "enthusiastic." "Enthusiastic," I repeated. "It does not sit quietly," he said. "It reaches, everything in range responds." I looked at my hands where I could now dimly see, if I concentrated, the golden threads of my own cultivation energy running through them. They did look very animated, wiggly even. They moved constantly, like curious kittens poking at everything nearby. "Sorry," I told my hands. "Do not apologize to your cultivation energy," said Yi Shenlong, and I am absolutely certain he was not smiling when I looked up, but it was a very near thing. He was a good teacher. A genuinely good teacher, which surprised me, because people that powerful often had no patience for explaining things they themselves had mastered so long ago the steps had blurred. But he was patient with me in a specific, focused way, watching me try things and failing and trying differently and adjusting his explanations each time until something clicked. It felt like being paid attention to. Actual attention, not the watching and assessing of the clan members. Attention that was, somehow, for my benefit. I was not used to being attended to. 300 years as the small golden garter snake under a rock did not produce a personality that expected to matter to other people. I was surprised to find that being attended to felt like standing in sunlight, warm and a little disorienting. The first evolution happened 3 weeks in the middle of a practice session. I was attempting to condense my spiritual energy into a more stable form, following Yi Shenlong's instructions, when something inside me, some deeper layer I had not known was there, simply opened. Like a room I had walked past for 300 years finally unlocking its door. The energy that came out was not golden. It was golden white, and it hit the courtyard in every direction like a small sunrise. And Yi Shenlong, who had been standing approximately 4 feet away, moved between me and the energy wave in the same instant it started, his own power rising to contain and redirect it before it could level the surrounding pavilions. When it cleared, I was sitting on the ground, slightly stunned, and my hair was a different shade, brighter, almost luminous, and there was a warmth in my chest that felt like the sun had moved inside me. "You evolved," said Yi Shenlong, looking down at me from a standing position. He was perfectly composed except for a very small tear in the sleeve of his robe from where my energy had grazed him. "I'm sorry about your sleeve," I said. "Zio Jin," he said, "you just broke through a cultivation stage that takes most serpents 50 years. But your sleeve." "The sleeve is not important," he said, with the firmness of someone saying it twice would not make it more convincing, and he knew it. I reached up and took his hand, which I was not thinking about, and turned it over to check his palm for burns. There were none. His hands were warm, larger than mine, steady in the way that people who are used to being the anchor of things are steady. I held his hand for a moment longer than I needed to check for burns, and then I let go, and neither of us mentioned it. "I feel different," I said. "You are different," he said. "Each evolution changes you. You are no longer what you were." "A very small snake." "A very small snake," he agreed, and I heard, unmistakably, the barest ghost of warmth, something like affection in the word. It was gone immediately, tucked back behind the vast controlled stillness of him, but I had heard it. 300 years of being the small thing has given me excellent ears for the things that are not quite said, and I heard that one very clearly. Haimo's schemes were accelerating meanwhile. I felt them the way you feel a storm coming, changes in the spiritual energy, tension in the faces of the guards, whispered conversations that stopped when I approached. He was building something. Some argument, some plan, some alliance aimed at having me removed from the mountain or worse. It was the or worse that I had begun to lose sleep over, which I had not expected to mind, because before becoming a person I had not been a particularly anxious snake. But being a person was, it turned out, fertile ground for anxiety because persons were very good at imagining futures. I was imagining futures. Some of them were quite bad, some of them, and this was the part that really surprised me, some of them had Yi Shenlong not in them, either because of Haimo or because of the tribulation, and those futures looked, from the outside, very gray. This was inconvenient information about my feelings. I sat with it for 2 days, turning it over like a smooth stone, before I had to admit to myself that somewhere between cultivation lessons and rock floating practice and the sleeve and the held hand, and his voice saying very small snake with something warm inside it, I had developed feelings about the snake emperor that were not the appropriate feelings of a guest toward their host. Oh no, I told my ceiling very quietly one night. The ceiling had no advice. I was going to have to handle this myself. Chapter 5. Haimo moved on the night of the Mid-Autumn Festival, which was either dramatic or practical timing depending on how you looked at it. The mountain was lit with lanterns, the clan was celebrating, and the emperor was in the main hall receiving ritual toasts from the elders. I was, as per my established habit, in the gardens because the gardens had plants and I liked plants, and also there were significantly fewer people in the gardens looking at me like I was an interesting puzzle. They came from the eastern gate. Not Haimo himself, he was, of course, inside being charming at the festival, creating his own witness to his alibi. 3 of his people, large and well-cultivated, moving through the stone paths between the pavilion walls with the smooth efficiency of hired violence. They had a specific kind of spiritual suppression jade that I recognized too late, because the moment it activated within range of me, my cultivation energy, which had been steadily growing and was now actually starting to behave itself, went entirely silent. This was deeply unpleasant. You do not know what you have come to rely on until it is removed. The warm golden center of me went cold and quiet, and in the sudden silence I was just a small person with legs in a garden, facing 3 significant threats with nothing but 300 years of being a prey animal, and knowing how to be very fast and very still. I chose fast. I ran, which was something I was now actually quite good at, having had a month of practice with legs, and I was nearly to the pavilion gate when the second jade activated and my legs decided to stop cooperating. I went down onto one knee, then both knees. The suppression was heavy, like wearing the mountain on my shoulders, pressing every part of me into the ground. The 3 of them surrounded me in a triangle. The largest of the 3 reached down and grabbed me by the collar of my robes, hauling me upright. The emperor, said the large one, will see that you are gone, and he will be sad about it, and then he will move on. Small pretty things do not last long in mountain politics. That, I said, even though speaking was an effort through the suppression, is a very long way of threatening a 300-year-old snake, and I want you to know I find the condescension somewhat offensive. The grip tightened, I was lifted. My instincts, 300 years of being picked up by things, hawks and large rocks sliding and branch falls and all the rest, fired all at once. I went completely limp deadweight in the specific way that makes even a firm grip unstable, and felt the large one's balance shift and tucked my chin and the spiritual energy that exploded through the suppression jade and into the garden at that moment did not come from me. It hit like a thunderstrike, clean and enormous and uncompromising, and all 3 of Haimo's people went flying in separate directions with the tidy efficiency of a man swatting flies. The suppression jade shattered. My golden energy flooded back into me with a rush that left me gasping. Yi Shenlong stood between me and where my attackers had been, and he was different. Not composed, not the collected, measured emperor. He was something older, something the clan remembered in their instincts and their old stories, the apex predator, fully deployed, and he was very, very angry. The anger was a presence in the garden. It had weight. It made the lantern flames in the distance go very still. He turned to me, and the anger changed immediately into something more alarming. The thing that replaces anger when the object of your protection is in front of you and you need to assess whether they are all right. "Zio Jin," he said, controlled again, but the effort was visible. "Are you hurt?" "My knees," I said, "are both protesting, but that is more about the suppression than the attack." I looked at the three attackers, who were all very quickly retreating. That was a significant deployment of energy. "Yes," he said. "How significant?" A pause. "It will set my tribulation preparations back somewhat." I stared at him. My golden eyes, which had been calibrating now for weeks and were much sharper than I had thought, could see the faint lines of his energy. They were slightly dimmer than they had been, just slightly, just enough. "You used a significant portion of your stored cultivation energy just now." "You were in danger," he said, as if this explained everything completely and required no further elaboration. "You need that energy for the tribulation that is trying to kill you." "You," he said quietly, "were in danger." I looked at him, he looked at me. The garden lanterns in the distance swayed softly. The spiritual energy of the mountain hummed around us, old and patient and much less concerned with tribulations and schemes than either of us were. "That was stupid," I said finally. "It was a very kind and selfless and incredibly stupid thing to do." "Yes," he agreed, which was not what I expected him to say. "Why?" I asked. He was quiet for a moment, just a moment. Then, "You already know why, Zio Jin." I did know. The same way I knew what the garden looked like when I hadn't used my eyes to look, through a different kind of sense entirely. The kind of sense that had nothing to do with cultivation and everything to do with the 300 years of knowing what it felt like when something larger was paying attention to you not as prey, but as something worth keeping safe. I reached over and took his hand again. He let me. "All right," I said, "what do we do about Haimo?" His fingers around mine were very steady. "Together," he said, "we deal with it together." It was the first time he had used that word, together. It hung in the air of the garden between us, and neither of us took it back. Chapter 6. The second evolution happened faster than the first, and the third faster than the second, and by the fourth one I had stopped being surprised and started taking notes. Each evolution changed me slightly, my hair brighter, my senses sharper, the golden energy in me more present and more articulate, like a language I was becoming more fluent in. But the changes were also internal. Each time I understood a little more about what I was and why. Elder Shan, who had become somewhat reconciled to my existence now that I had stopped accidentally floating things in the council meetings, showed me ancient records in the clan library about the radiant golden cultivation line. The ancestor was an ancient golden spirit snake who had, in the very old days of the mountain, briefly been consort to a great emperor. Their bloodline had scattered over centuries, grown quiet, been forgot. But bloodlines did not truly disappear. They waited in quiet dens under warm rocks, absorbing sunlight, waiting for the right herb. "Linglong," said Elder Shan, showing me an illustrated scroll. "The rarest evolved state. The ancient texts say it appears once in a millennium. The body becomes semi-translucent, not invisible, but as if made of crystal and light. The spiritual energy is no longer just power, it becomes healing, purifying. The Linglong can restore cultivation that has been damaged." I looked at the scroll illustration, a figure rendered in gold and white light, almost not quite human, gorgeous and slightly frightening. "That's what I'm evolving toward?" I asked. "It is what you have already begun," said Elder Shan, looking at me significantly, and I realized he was looking at my hands, where, in certain lights, you could just barely see the suggestion of the bones beneath my skin. "Oh," I said. "The Emperor has known," said Elder Shan carefully, "for some time. He has not said. He did not want to." The old elder paused, searching for diplomatic words, "add pressure to your existing situation." "Yi Shenlong had known what I was becoming and had not told me, not to hide it, but because he was protecting me from the weight of it." This was the most infuriatingly considerate thing I had ever heard in my life. I went to find him immediately to tell him this. He was in his study, which was a large room full of ancient maps and cultivation manuals, and exactly one personal item, a small jade figurine of a serpent that was clearly very old and that he was clearly unaware I had noticed. He looked up when I came in with the expression of someone who could tell from my face that a conversation was incoming. "You knew," I said, "about the Linglong?" "Yes," he said. "And you didn't tell me?" "No," he said. "That is," I said, "extremely considerate, and I have feelings about it." He set down his brush and looked at me with full attention. "What feelings?" The kind, I said, deciding that 300 years of being a small snake who survived by reading the situation and acting accordingly was finally going to be useful, that I have been having for approximately a month and a half and have been trying very hard to be sensible about and failing. A pause, then I have also, he said very quietly, been trying to be sensible. How is that going? I asked. Poorly, he admitted, which was a word I had never once expected to hear from Yi Shenlong, and it hit me somewhere warm and entirely unguarded. I laughed. I could not help it. The whole ridiculous situation, the herb and the legs and the rock floating and the cultivation and the scheming snake king and the elders, and now this enormous powerful mountain-made man admitting to failing at being sensible about me, it came out all at once, and I laughed until I had to sit down on the nearest chair. He watched me laugh with the expression of a man watching something he had been trying not to want for a long time and losing the fight against wanting it. I ate your herb, I said, still laughing. By accident, I thought it was a snack. I know, he said. And now I am possibly the most important cultivation development in 1,000 years, and also I live in your guest rooms, and I have been in love with you since approximately the second week, and I have absolutely no idea what to do about any of it. Silence. Since the second week, he repeated. You fixed my sleeve tear, I said, the one I made with my energy explosion. You fixed it yourself. I saw you. You thought I wasn't looking. He had no answer to this because it was true. Come here, he said. I went. He reached out and smoothed my hair back from my face with a careful, deliberate hand, the way you touch something you have been thinking about touching for a long time and are finally allowing yourself. His gray eyes were very close and very warm and absolutely nothing like a storm right now, more like the sky after a storm when everything was clear and new. I will deal with the tribulation, he said, and then I will deal with Hai Mo and you. He paused, the corner of his mouth doing the thing I had catalogued 47 times by now, will stop eating things that glow. I make no promises, I said, and he kissed me, and the golden energy in me did something spectacular and illuminated both of us for about 4 seconds, and it was extremely embarrassing and also worth it. The Linglong form, as it turned out, arrived at the most inconvenient possible time, during the assault of the demon snake clan. Hai Mo, after his garden plot failed, had done something rather more dramatic than scheme internally. He had opened communications with the demon snake clan, an ancient, corrupted lineage of serpent demons who had been exiled from the Jade Serpent Mountains 3 generations ago and had been festering on their resentment ever since, and invited them back through a border he controlled. This was treason. This was also, from a practical standpoint, a serious problem, because the demon snake clan's leader, a vast ancient thing called the Black Coil, had been eating corruption and dark energy for 3 generations and was very nearly as powerful as the Snake Emperor himself. The battle came to the mountain's heart. I will not pretend it was not frightening. I will not pretend that watching Yi Shenlong, who was already pouring extraordinary energy into containing the tribulation clouds gathering above the mountain, deploy his remaining cultivation reserves against the Black Coil, was not the most terrifying thing I had experienced in 330-some-odd years of existence. He was flagging, I could see it. The double drain, tribulation above, demon below, was pulling at him visibly, those brilliant gray eyes going slightly unfocused, his movements slowing by fractions. No, I said, and I meant it as a word, and it came out as a sound the mountain heard. The Linglong form was not gentle. It did not arrive politely like my other evolutions in a courtyard with someone to contain the overflow. It arrived the way the sun arrives in a dark room when you throw open the shutters, immediately, totally, and with complete disregard for anyone's visual comfort. I became light and gold and something older than either of those words suggested, and I stepped between Yi Shenlong and the Black Coil, and the golden-white energy moved through me and out of me in every direction, and the corruption in the demon snake clan began, very rapidly, to have a bad time. What the Linglong is, as Elder Shan had explained, is purifying. It cannot destroy by violence alone, but corruption, old, festered, poison cultivation that it could burn through the way the sun burns through mist, slowly at first, then not slowly at all. The Black Coil shrieked. It was a sound that had been terrifying everything in range for 3 generations. I found it less frightening than I might have, possibly because I was currently made of light and my threat assessment had recalibrated somewhat. You are, said Yi Shenlong from somewhere behind me, and his voice had an astonished quality I had never heard in it before, extraordinary. I am a 300-year-old garter snake, I said, very busy currently, who accidentally ate an important herb. Those things, he said, and I could hear him smiling, actually smiling, are not mutually exclusive. The black quill fell. The demon snake clan, significantly demoralized by the apparent small golden sunrise that had just disassembled their leader's corruption like unraveling a badly knit sweater, scattered. Haimo, realizing that his plan had just gone extremely wrong in a very public way that had been witnessed by the entire Elder Council and approximately 200 clan members who would all very readily testify to it, attempted to flee the mountain. He got as far as the eastern gate before Yi Shenlong, cultivation restored and then some by whatever the Linglong state did to the energy around it, caught him. The conversation that followed was short, and I did not hear all of it because I was sitting on a rock in the middle of the courtyard, still occasionally glowing and trying to figure out how to turn the Linglong form off, which was, like many things with my cultivation, apparently a matter of emotional regulation rather than technique. "Stop thinking about it," said Elder Shan, who had apparently decided I was now his personal cultivation project, from approximately 15 feet away and behind a very solid pillar. "The Linglong releases when you release it." "How do I release it?" I asked. "Think of something calm," he suggested. I thought of the warm rock and the sunbeams and 300 years of being completely unimportant and unremarkable and small, and the light faded gently, and I was just me again, sitting on the courtyard stone with the night sky above and the mountain solid around me and the distant sound of the clan beginning to process the events of the last hour. Yi Shenlong came back. He sat down next to me on the rock, which was not large enough for 2 adults, but he sat there anyway. His shoulder was against mine. We sat in the dark and the quiet together, and neither of us said anything for a while. "It's over?" I asked finally. "Haimo will be dealt with by clan law," he said. "The demon snake clan's leader is gone. The rest will not return." A pause. "It is over." "Your tribulation," I said. "When does it come?" 3 days, he said. "The clouds have been building." Above us, in the very high sky above the Jade Serpent Mountains, something vast and electrical was coiling. I could feel it, the gathering attention of the heavens, looking at what it intended to test. "I'll be there," I said. "When it happens, I will be there." Zio Jin. "If the Linglong can restore damaged cultivation," I said, "it can shore up the damage as the lightning falls. I can't take it for you, but I can make sure you don't go into it depleted." He looked at me. I looked back with 300 years of being a creature that had learned to tell sincerity from performance at 10 meters. "You," he said quietly, "are the most inconvenient thing that has ever happened to me." "You said I could keep the rock," I reminded him. "I did," he said, "and then, Zio Jin, after the tribulation." He stopped and restarted, and watching Yi Shenlong look for words was so rare and so extraordinary that I held very still to not disturb it. "I would like you to stay, not as a guest, I would like—" "Yes," I said. "I haven't finished." "The answer is yes," I said. "It was yes a month ago. I was just waiting for you to catch up." He looked at me for a moment. Then he made a sound that was, I was nearly certain, a laugh, real, unguarded, surprised out of him, quiet but completely genuine, and it was the most beautiful thing I had heard in 330 years. "Catch up," he repeated. "You had other things on your mind," I said generously. "The tribulation, the treason, the politics." I was being patient. "Extraordinarily patient," he agreed, and he was still quietly laughing, and he put his arm around me and I leaned into him, and above us the tribulation clouds turned and gathered and waited for their 3 days, and below us the mountain was loud with the aftermath of battle, and in between, just us on the 2 small rock in the quiet between the things. Chapter 7. I have a note about the tribulation. It was the worst 3 hours of my life, and I have eaten a mysterious glowing herb and grown legs, so that is a meaningful comparison. The clan gathered at the peak. The elders had cleared a large stone circle and planted formation flags at the cardinal points, and the tribulation clouds above it were enormous. Wrong large, the kind of large that made you reconsider the universe's proportions and find your own very humble. They were black-green and shot through with horizontal lightning that moved like something alive, and the weight of spiritual pressure coming from them made even Elder Shan, who had survived several of these from a distance, look like he would prefer to be somewhere else entirely. Yi Shenlong stood in the center of the circle. He had done something specific with his hair, let it fully down unbraided so it hung in black silk sheets to his waist, the silver threads catching the green lightning light overhead. He wore white. I had not seen him in white before. He looked like he was dressed for something serious and permanent, which he was, one way or another. I was at the edge of the formation. Not inside, entering the tribulation zone without being the target was functionally suicide, but close enough. I could feel my Linglong energy aligned and ready, warm and patient at the center of me, waiting to be useful. He looked at me before it started, just looked across the stone circle, gray eyes steady and clear. I looked back and put everything I had into that look. All the things 300 years of not saying things and then 1 month of learning to say them had accumulated, and I thought I saw it land because his expression for just a moment was completely unguarded. Then the first bolt fell. Here is the thing about celestial lightning tribulations that the texts describe but cannot quite convey. They are not random. The lightning thinks. It looks at you and finds the things in your cultivation that are weak or impure or unresolved, and it strikes those things specifically. It is not trying to destroy the body. It is trying to destroy everything in the cultivator that is not absolutely certain it deserves to ascend. Yi Shenlong took the first bolt straight to the chest and did not move an inch. The stone circle cracked under his feet from the impact. The clan collectively made a sound like a single held breath. I sent a thread of golden energy through the formation border. Careful. The tribulation could not recognize it as interference if I was precise enough, and touched the edges of the damage the lightning had made in his cultivation and began to warm it. Not repair it, not shield it, just hold it, keep it from spreading while he fought. He felt it, he glanced at me. I gave him a small nod that I hoped communicated, I'm here, keep going, I'm not going anywhere. The second bolt fell, then the third. I worked quietly between each one, maintaining the thread, holding the edges of the damage, pushing warmth into the places where the lightning was finding its purchase. It was like holding the walls of a house against a storm. You could not stop the storm, but you could keep the walls from coming down. The seventh bolt was the biggest. I felt it building for 5 minutes before it arrived, the entire sky condensing toward a single point above the stone circle. The clan members farthest from the center were backing away, even Elder Shan was retreating. The pressure of it was like being pressed flat against the earth. "Yeshnlong," I said very loudly because I could see from the thread that his focus was fracturing slightly at the edges, the sheer volume of sustained lightning beginning to fray the absolute stillness he needed. And sometimes what a person needed was not strategy, but just to hear their name said by someone who meant it. You are the Snake Emperor. You have been doing this for 1,000 years. The clouds are going to have to try much harder. Several elders turned to look at me in absolute disbelief at the concept of someone yelling encouragement at the Snake Emperor during his tribulation. The corner of Yi Shenlong's mouth moved. In the middle of the seventh tribulation bolt, which was falling now, which was enormous and catastrophic and everything the heavens had, the Snake Emperor's mouth moved in a tiny smile. He raised one hand. The lightning hit it. His entire body lit up white gold from the impact, and the Linglong energy in me sang out toward him in response. Not my doing, just instinct, the energy recognizing something, reaching for something, and in the brief roaring chaos of the seventh bolt I felt it. Our energies meeting, golden and silver gray, and something in his cultivation that had been locked for a very long time simply opening. Like a room he had walked past for years, finally unlocking its door. The lightning tribulation clouds, having deployed everything they had, dispersed, slowly at first, then with the ungracious speed of something that has run out of arguments. Within 10 minutes the sky above the Jade Serpent Mountains was clear, startlingly, brilliantly clear, the kind of clear that happened after everything that needed to happen had happened. Yi Shenlong stood in the stone circle. He was smoking slightly. His white robes were singed. His hair was extraordinary. The silver threads had multiplied, spreading from his temples to weave through the black in patterns I had not seen before, the visual signature of someone who had just broken through to a new cultivation level. He was also smiling, an actual visible, clear smile, not the corner of the mouth thing, an actual smile in front of 200 clan members and every single elder. Elder Shan actually sat down from the shock of it. I crossed the formation border the moment the tribulation energy cleared and walked up to Yi Shenlong and looked at him. "You're all right," I said, checking. Running my hands over his arms, his face, looking at the golden thread I could still feel connecting us. The damage was being repaired from the inside now, his newly ascended cultivation turning its power on itself. "I am considerably better than all right," he said, and he sounded different, deeper, more there somehow, like a voice that had gone from one stone wall to solid bedrock. He caught my hands where they were checking his arms and held them. "The seventh bolt," he said. Something opened. "I felt it too," I said. "Did you do that on purpose?" "I don't know what I did," I said honestly. "I just reached." "You reached," he said, and looked at me with those storm-gray eyes that were, right now, completely cloudless. And then he pulled me forward and held me against him in front of everyone, his arms around me steady and warm and final. And I heard the assembled clan of the Jade Serpent Mountains make approximately 212 different sounds of combined surprise and delight, and in Elder Shan's case what sounded like quiet, vindicated weeping. "That," I said, my face against his shoulder and his heart beating under my ear at the solid pace of the newly ascended, "is going to be very hard to unannounce." "Good," he said, "I have no interest in unannouncing it." Chapter 8. Let me tell you about the year that followed, in roughly the order it happened. Haimo was stripped of his territory and exiled, with the unanimous agreement of the Elder Council, 3 of whom were so relieved to have it done that they personally escorted him to the border. He did not come back. He was smart enough to understand that the combination of a newly ascended Snake Emperor and whatever I was becoming made the return policy extremely unfavorable. The Demon Snake clan, leaderless and significantly demoralized, splintered. Most of them dispersed into other mountain ranges. A small faction petitioned the Emperor for readmission to the Jade Serpent Mountains, citing changed circumstances and also the evidence of the Black Coil's defeat as proof that the old corrupting influence was gone. Yi Shenlong, after a council meeting and long discussion with me about what it meant to offer something a second chance, admitted them on probation. I thought this was correct. He looked at me when he said it in the council meeting just briefly, and I nodded, and he announced it without ceremony and moved on, and the entire council did not see the look, but I did. My evolutions stabilized. The Linglong state became something I could enter and exit with reasonable control, like a room in myself I knew the way to now. My cultivation continued to develop in ways that continued to baffle Elder Shan and delight him simultaneously. I spent many afternoons in his library. He was very old and very knowledgeable, and he had eventually, after considerable resistance, become something like fond of me, which he expressed through increasingly elaborate scroll retrieval and pointed refusals to acknowledge it. And then there was the egg. Neither Yi Shenlong nor I had discussed it at any length beforehand. High cultivation serpent demons did not always produce offspring. It was a matter of spiritual resonance more than anything else, and many powerful pairs went centuries without. But one morning in early spring, I woke up with a specific awareness that the universe had made a decision without consulting us. I stared at the ceiling for a moment processing this information. Then I said, "Shenlong." He said, which is the sound he made when he was still most of the way asleep but registering that I was speaking. "I think," I said carefully, "you should be fully awake for this next part." He opened his eyes. He looked at me. He did the slow, careful reading that he had been doing since the clearing with the somersault, the reading that had gotten sharper and more accurate over the year we had been together. Something in my expression told him everything he needed to know before I said it. "Ah," he said. "Yes," I said. A pause. "Are you?" "Somewhere between completely delighted and mildly terrified," I said, which was accurate. "That," he said, sitting up and touching my face very gently, "is an entirely reasonable response." "How are you?" I asked. He was quiet for a moment, the kind of quiet that was not uncertainty but fullness. "The same," he said finally, "somewhere between completely delighted and mildly terrified." We sat there together in the morning and let it settle around us, this new thing that had grown out of the herb and the legs and the falling into bushes and the rock and the together and all of it, and it was a lot. It was a very great deal, and it was also the most natural feeling thing that had happened to me since sunbeams. The egg arrived 6 weeks later. It was golden, obviously, everything involving me was golden, with faint silver patterns moving through the shell like captured lightning. It was unreasonably beautiful. I stared at it for about 45 minutes after it settled, just cataloging the patterns. Yi Shenlong came and sat beside the nest. We had established a nest, which had involved a very spirited debate about location, because I had wanted it near the garden and he had wanted it in the secure inner chamber, and we had compromised on the inner chamber with a window that looked onto the garden, which satisfied neither of us completely and both of us adequately, and he looked at the egg for a while and then looked at me. "Golden with lightning patterns," I said. "Yes," he said. "That seems," I said, "like an accurate summary of what we produced together." "It does," he agreed and reached over and adjusted one of the nest cushions that had shifted slightly, with the same careful, deliberate attention he gave to everything that mattered to him. The hatchling arrived on a morning in summer when the light was coming in at a perfect angle through the window. They came out small and golden and already extremely opinionated about their environment, which was how we knew the nature had distributed itself fairly evenly. Within an hour of hatching, they had made a small rock float, cried about it, and then made it float again to make sure it was repeatable. Yi Shenlong and I watched this with the specific shared expression of two people who are going to have a very interesting next several centuries. "They need a name," I said. "They do," he said. We looked at each other, then at the hatchling, who had moved on from the floating rock and was now attempting to eat a sunbeam, which was not going well but was being pursued with great determination. "Zhaoyun," I said, "little cloud." Yi Shenlong looked at the hatchling's golden-silver shimmer, the way they moved in and out of the light. "Zhaoyun," he agreed. Zhaoyun looked up at us with enormous golden eyes that already had gray in them, storm gray threaded through the gold like the lightning on their egg, and made a sound of emphatic hatchling opinion. "They agree," I said. "They always will," said Yi Shenlong in the tone of a man making a calm prediction about his child that was definitely going to be accurate. "They have your emphatic nature." "And your certainty," I said. "That is a very dangerous combination." "It is," he said, not sounding the least bit concerned about it. The question of where to live after the hatchling arrived renewed the great rock debate with additional dimensions. The inner chamber was fine, the mountain was fine, the clan was fine, the elders had made their peace with me, and some of the younger members had formed enthusiastic opinions about Zhaoyun, and I had developed something resembling a community for the first time in my 330 years. It was good. But I missed being outside. I had always missed being outside. I was a snake, fundamentally, and snakes liked open air and sunlight and the particular comfort of knowing exactly where your warm rock was. "We could," I said one afternoon, "build something in the garden." "In the garden," Yi Shenlong repeated. "Not large," I said. "We don't need large, something with a good southern exposure for the sunlight, and a rock somewhere nearby, a good flat rock." He looked at me for a long moment. "You want to live next to a rock?" "I want to live somewhere that feels like home," I said, "and home for me has always been the rock and the sunlight and the garden." He was quiet, doing the thing where he turned something over in his mind. "The emperor's residence," he said finally, "has historically been the inner chamber." "Historically," I agreed. "This would be unusual." "Yes," I said, "like the rest of this." His mouth curved, the real smile, the one that I had collected like a treasured thing over the past year and that still, every single time, felt like discovering something rare. "The rest of this," he said. "You mean the herb?" "The herb," I agreed, "and the legs and the somersaults and the rock that was yours all along, and all of it." "And all of it," he echoed quietly. "It turned out all right," I said. "It turned out," he said, looking at me with the gray eyes that had no storm in them at all anymore, just clear and deep and entirely there, "extraordinarily well. We built the garden pavilion. It had a good southern exposure. There was a flat rock nearby, which was not my original rock, that was half a li south and quite fixed, but it was an excellent rock. I spend considerable time on it in the mornings when the sun is good. Zhaoyun, who has my opinion about sunbeams and Yi Shenlong's opinion about efficiency, has begun joining me there on the days they can convince their father to let them skip morning cultivation practice. The practice is important," Yi Shenlong says. "The sunbeam is also important," I say. Zhaoyun, who has been listening to this debate approximately every fourth morning of their young life, has developed a diplomatic solution. They practice cultivation on the rock in the sunbeam, which satisfies everyone, and then they eat breakfast with us in the garden pavilion. And then their father takes them for actual practice in the courtyard, while I go terrorize Elder Shan's library in pursuit of information about some new thing my cultivation is doing that has confused everyone. It is a good life. It is a genuinely, surprisingly, deeply good life. I, Zhaojin, formerly known as that very small golden garter snake under the rock, currently known as consort to the snake emperor, ongoing known as spiritual nuisance by the Elder Council's standards, have no complaints. I do not even have complaints about the legs, which I have, after all this time, entirely made my peace with. The knees still occasionally surprise me, but I have formed opinions about them that tend toward fond. They are mine. They walked me into a clearing and caused me to fall at the emperor's feet, and while this was undignified, it was also, in retrospect, the best thing my legs have ever done. I still sometimes think about the rock, my original rock, half a li south, flat on top, good sun exposure, 300 years of quiet and sunbeams and the patient accumulation of something I did not know I was building toward. I think the rock knew. Rocks are old, they have time to figure things out. They sit in the spiritual energy lines and absorb and wait, and eventually something comes along that they've been warming up for, and it sits on them. And then one day the something eats an herb and gets legs and goes stumbling into a mountain emperor's clearing, and the whole long, slow accumulation of 300 years arrives at exactly where it was meant to go. The universe, in its infinite wisdom, has a particular sense of humor. I am on balance glad of it. The epilogue. A Tuesday several decades later, in which nothing dramatic happens at all, and this is wonderful. It is a Tuesday. I know it is a Tuesday because Elder Shan only holds his cultivation theory lectures on Tuesdays, and I can hear Zio Yun very quietly arguing with him through the open window, which means Zio Yun is in the library instead of the courtyard, and has probably decided that the scroll on ancient formation theory is more interesting than whatever their father had planned for morning practice. Their father knows this. He is sitting across from me on the garden pavilion's low steps with a cup of tea he has not looked at in 10 minutes and the complicated expression of a parent who is proud and also mildly exasperated. "They're in the library again," he says. "Yes," I say. "They have practice at the 8th hour." "They know," I say, "they'll be there." He is quiet, turning this over in the familiar way, and then lets it settle. Zio Yun will be there. Zio Yun is always where they say they'll be, even when they're somewhere they weren't supposed to be first. This is the Yi Shenlong in them, the absolute reliability of their word, operating quietly beneath the golden chaos of everything else. The garden is at its best this time of year, the stone paths warm and the plants in their full summer occupation of every available surface, and the rock is doing what it always does, being flat and warm and present. I have not sat on it yet today. I am considering it. Yi Shenlong, who has been watching me look at the rock for approximately 1 minute, says, "Go sit on the rock." "I was going to," I say. "You have been going to for 20 minutes. "I was building anticipation," I say with great dignity, and I go and sit on the rock. It is a good rock. It was a good rock decades ago when we placed it here, and it is a good rock now. The sun on it is warm, and the spiritual energy of the mountain runs just below the surface of it in the specific pattern I have been sitting on since long before I had legs to fold under me. I close my eyes and feel it, the old familiar hum, and I am briefly, completely just a snake in a sunbeam, uncomplicated, present, home. I hear Yi Shenlong get up and cross the garden path, and then he is sitting next to me on the rock, which has always been adequate for 2 people if the 2 people don't mind being fairly close, which we don't. His shoulder is against mine. His tea, apparently relocated, is resting on his knee. We sit in the sun together and do not say anything for a while. "I have been thinking," I say eventually. "About?" he asks, not opening his eyes either. "The original rock," I say, "half a li south. I haven't visited it in a while." "We could go," he says. "On Tuesday," I say. "Zio Yun will argue about coming along." "Zio Yun will argue about coming along," he agrees, and then come along and attempt to meditate on it and float it approximately 2 inches off the ground and then act as if this is a normal thing to do to a rock. "It is a normal thing to do to a rock," I say. "For our family," he says, in the tone that has always said our family, like it is a discovery that continues to surprise him pleasantly. "Yes." I lean my head against his shoulder. The sun moves. The mountain hums under us, old and patient and steady. From the library window I can hear Zio Yun's voice, animated, arguing about whether the 4th node of an ancient formation had been placed for structural or symbolic reasons. Elder Shan's response is measured and slightly pained and entirely fond, the fond of a very old teacher who has found a student worth being pained by. This, I think, with all 300 and however many years of my accumulated self. This is what the sunbeam was for. This is what the rock was for. The 3 centuries of quiet and the 1 herb and the legs and the stumbling and the choosing and all of it, this particular Tuesday morning on a particular rock, with the mountain in the garden and the sound of a student arguing with an elder and a cup of tea and this shoulder and this sun. Some things glow because they are important. Some things glow because they are exactly where they are supposed to be. I am, it turns out, both.